Marilyn Monroe died with a dream. Hollywood refused her. She fought for years to make this one movie, and they shut her down. 70 years later, the secret of why they buried her final role still haunts the industry. Marilyn Monroe didn't just want to be a pretty face in a subway great dress, she wanted to be an artist. And if you've only ever seen her as that breathy blonde bombshell, you've never really seen her. Long before the world called her an icon, before the scandals and the heartbreaks, Marilyn dreamed of making one movie that would change everything. It was a role she fought for, begged for, schemed for, and when the studio bosses slammed the door in her face, they buried not just a script, but a piece of her soul. 70 years later, the secret of that lost movie still haunts Hollywood because it reveals just how far they'd go to keep her in her cage. She was Norma Jean Mortensen once, an unwanted little girl shuffled between foster homes and orphanages, holding onto her dreams like a worn-out teddy bear. And that dream, it wasn't just fame. It wasn't even money. It was to become what her childhood idol had been, a goddess of the silver screen, but one with depth. She adored Jean Harlow. People say Marilyn used to keep an old grainy photo of Jean taped inside her dressing room mirror, staring at it like a promise. She saw in Jean the blueprint for what she could be: funny, vulnerable, and tragic all at once. But Marilyn didn't want to just mimic her idol. She wanted to play her. She wanted to make the Jean Harlow story the film that would prove to every critic that she wasn't a joke in white gloves and red lips. 1955, Marilyn was the biggest name on every marquee. She just stunned the world with the 7-year itch. That famous scene, the dress blowing up over the subway, great. But behind the scenes, she was more miserable than anyone knew. She hated being typecast as the ditzy blonde. She hated the way producers leered at her, and she really hated how the critics sneered when she said she wanted to be more than a pinup girl. That's when she made her move. She started slipping drafts of the Jean Harlow script to trusted friends, telling them, "This is the one. This is the real me." But the men who ran Hollywood back then, they didn't want the real Marilyn. They wanted the fantasy. So when she marched into the studio boardroom demanding to buy the rights, they laughed in her face. People who were there that day still talk about it in hushed tones. Marilyn, in her tight cashmere sweater, sitting across from a row of old studio heads. Her voice shaking, but her eyes locked. She told them she'd use her own money. She told them she'd produce it herself. And they told her no over and over. They said America didn't want to see their blonde goddess playing another blonde goddess who died tragically young. They said it would confuse audiences. The truth was uglier. They were terrified that Marilyn might finally be taken seriously, that she'd have power. Because when a woman like Marilyn had power, she didn't have to dance for them anymore. So they locked the script away and fed her more dumb blonde parts instead. But Marilyn wasn't done fighting. She fled to New York, started studying with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio, and told anyone who would listen that she'd find a way to make her Jean Harlow movie with or without the studios. That's when the rumors of lost test footage began. Some say Marilyn wore Harlow's famous white satin gown for an unannounced screen test. They say it happened late at night after hours, with only her and a trusted cameraman she called Mr. Shadow. Others claim there's a reel somewhere in an old MGM vault, showing Marilyn transforming into Harlow so perfectly that it gave even the most hardened producers chills. But when Marilyn's enemies found out, they made sure the footage vanished. Just like that, her dream was gone. Friends say Marilyn never recovered from that betrayal. You can see it in the film she did after. In Bus Stop, in The Prince, and The Showgirl, there's a sadness behind her eyes, like she's saying lines someone else wrote, trapped in a cage she built for herself but couldn't unlock. She'd become a brand, not a person. And every time she tried to break free to become the serious actress she wanted to be, the press called her difficult, the directors called her unreliable, and the studio bosses called her ungrateful. Meanwhile, the Jean Harlow script gathered dust in a filing cabinet no one dared open. In her final days, Marilyn spoke of it again. Just weeks before she died, she sat with a friend, a half-empty bottle of champagne on the coffee table, and whispered, "If they'd let me make that picture, maybe none of this would have happened." She believed the world would have seen her differently. Maybe they would have forgiven her mistakes. Maybe they would have stopped calling her a joke. But the studios wanted her to stay the beautiful mess they could control. So they kept her in the shadows until the shadows swallowed her whole. When she died, the tabloids spun their usual stories: pills, lovers, conspiracy theories. They talked about her affairs with Kennedy, about her slurred phone calls, about her unfinished final movie, Something's Got to Give, but nobody mentioned the one movie that really broke her. Nobody talked about the Jean Harlow project that might have saved her life by giving her a reason to keep fighting. In the decades since, film historians have hunted for that lost footage. Some claim it was burned in an accidental fire. Others believe it's still out there, mislabeled in an archive waiting to be found. And when people say it's just a rumor, the old-timers in Hollywood laugh and shake their heads. If you only knew what they buried, one said. And here we are 70 years later, still talking about Marilyn as the tragic blonde, the dumb sex symbol frozen in time on a subway. Great, but she was so much more. She was a woman who read Dostoevsky between takes, who scribbled poetry in her diaries at M, who fought for equal pay before it was cool, who wanted to direct her own movies, who wanted to play roles that scared her, who wanted to show the world that beauty could be complicated, that a goddess could also be a ghost. And when they told her she couldn't, she fought anyway. That's why the story of her lost Jean Harlow movie still matters. It reminds us that Hollywood didn't just kill Marilyn Monroe. The person they killed Marilyn Monroe, the artist. Today, the Forever Marilyn statue towers over Palm Springs, a frozen memory of her most famous moment. Tourists pose under her giant skirt, giggling at the glimpse of her stockings. They don't see the woman who sat in boardrooms fighting for her soul. They don't see the sleepless nights, the letters to Harlow's estate begging for permission, the tear-stained script pages she carried in her purse like a talisman. They just see the icon, the tragedy. But if that lost film ever surfaces, maybe the world will finally understand why Marilyn Monroe wasn't just the next Jean Harlow. She was trying to become something new, something nobody could control. Some say that one day a studio intern will open a rusty film canister in a forgotten vault and find it the reel that shows Marilyn not as the joke they painted her to be, but as the actress she knew she could be. Until then, it's up to us to remember to tell her story the way she wanted it told. To see the real woman behind the wiggle and the wink, the real Marilyn Monroe forever waiting for her close-up long after the lights went out.